So, hello and welcome to 360 Chat podcast. I have a special guest today, special for me, and I'll explain later in the chat. But her name is Alice Lyons. She has her own company. Her own company is called Dark Coffee. We're going to know a lot bit more about that. So, welcome, Alice.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me on. This is so exciting.
I'm excited for you to be on because I'll tell you why. When we had lockdown and I met you, a lot changed for me because in LinkedIn was like, it's very professional, but I kept very sort of like not me. I had to just be someone else. And then I met you.
And I ruined it for you.
And there was a lot of changes, definitely. I kind of got, oh, hang on a moment, she's been very forward and very frontal, and there was lots of things which was really great. It was so nice for me because it allowed me to express myself more, and I realized my contacts, nothing against my other contacts, but they were very formal.
Yes.
And you don't have to be, and you can, and we are now, since lockdown, we are learning a lot about being yourself. I certainly am, but on social media, I wasn't. I wasn't before. So, Alice, tell us about your role. What is Dark Coffee?
Oh, thanks for that little bit of feedback there. That's so great to hear, because like a huge part of my remit is helping people to express themselves more authentically and be more confidently. And to hear that I had that kind of impact on you is freaking awesome. Definitely. So thank you so much. So Dark Coffee, it's a wellbeing change agency, which is a really annoying kind of millennial way of saying I help people with their wellbeing. So I take on a role of kind of an advisor, a facilitator, whatever you'd like to call it. And I just help people become a more badass version of themselves, basically. So I do different things. Confidence coaching is something that I'm doing more of now. So I'm working a lot more closely with one-on-one clients, because I've realized in the beginning I was kind of trying to give mental health education to a lot of people, because I was like, everybody needs to know this stuff. So the best thing I can do is talk to the most number of people. But actually what you find when you try and talk to a lot of people is that you actually kind of talk to no one. And also I think mental health is in this kind of interesting gestation period still. And just not a lot of people are on board with the way that I want to be getting people to think about it. It's still kind of seen as quite a big scary topic, and I kind of want to progress the conversation further faster. So we've kind of pivoted as a company. So we're working more with early adopters now. We're working with change makers and leaders in companies, and a lot more small businesses as well, because previously I was focused on corporates. But the thing about corporates is they move very slowly, and I haven't got time for that. So going to work more with the smaller companies, the more dynamic people who are like, we know the value of mental health training, we know the value of looking after our people, and we know that everything else will follow from that. So I'm working with those guys quite closely, doing talks, workshops, group discussions, all sorts of different things. I've got some interesting little projects coming through, like I've got a merch line coming out, and all sorts of stuff. And I also do my own podcast as well, as you know, called Dark Coffee. So that's a very long, rambly introduction. I haven't spoken to anyone all day. I'm so excited about it.
I can tell. It was like 100 miles an hour. What about? Ladies and gentlemen, we'll put this in slow motion for you.
But I'm like half speed. I always talk really fast, and it's something I'm very conscious of trying to change. But then I figure you get value for money, because you get more in a short space of time, much like a good cup of coffee.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you're saying about you now kind of collaborating with a lot of companies, especially the smaller ones. So that's something I certainly kind of would like myself to learn a lot more of, because it's definitely, now we're in that stage where you have to collaborate. And I'm individually collaborating with people, but yours with small companies. It's interesting you're saying about the larger companies are putting you off more because they're slow. You mean slow as in they're slow to make decisions, I would take it is.
Yeah, mainly that. Also slow to pay, which really frustrates me as a small business owner. It's just one of those things, like there's so much bureaucracy. As a company grows, the processes get more complex and more convoluted. So even if you want to go in and do good work as a kind of third party supplier, it's really hard to find the right people. It's really hard to get it all signed off. It's really hard, like I say, with pay. you know, that's a truism for a lot of companies, is that, you know, getting onto a system is really complicated, let alone like getting it pushed through and stuff. And your end users are very different from your customer usually. That's one of the things that I find quite discouraging, is because with a lot of my content and the way that I talk to people on the podcast, I'm talking to my end user, the people who will benefit from that, but they're not always the person that has the purse strings and the kind of buying decision. So that disparity is really difficult for me to reconcile, and that's something I found really, really challenging in the past. And similarly, like I said about working with people who really get what I'm saying and really want to work with me, that's sometimes not the case in big corporates as well, because they tend to just shove everyone in a room together. It's not very often optional. It's normally like, oh, we just got someone in and you all have to go. So you get this really weird vibe in the room where some people are really into it. You'll normally get like 10% of people who are super passionate about it and absolutely love it. But then the vast majority are not that bothered, or they don't see the value, or they're too stressed, so they don't want to take time out of their day, ironically, for wellbeing training. And it's just one of those things. Like it's a very different energy to when you get, you know, if I'm selling to the public, for instance, if I'm doing a webinar or something like that, everybody's bought a ticket, so they're already buying into it, and they already, you know, usually they've already followed me on social media for a long time. So yeah, there's lots of differences that come between corporates and SMEs. But I think myself, along with other people, we've kind of been trained to think that's where the big money is. Like if you go to corporates, they sign off, but like money's not the main driver for me anyway. It's something that's important, and I want to get paid for the work that I do, but it's not important that I get paid an extra digit just to go with that company and have, you know, their logo on my website. I'm not really about that. It's more about the impact.
Yeah, long term. You're looking at long term. It's it for yourself as well as your customers. That's, I mean, it's interesting. From the other side of the table there, I've been the facilitator for bringing in people well-being as a well-being advisor, as a well-being facilitator, and I know what you mean by it, because I've had to have other people in who are part of the decision making, but they have no interest in that actual area, and so if they don't connect with the person completely, forgetting about the subject, you've had it. So if the person, and it could be the person's look, depending on the actual person's personality. I know one of them was down to the actual person's sexuality. You know, don't worry, he left in the end. But there's
Did he leave, or was he thrown out?
I think he was kind of sussed out after one of the sessions with me, but it wasn't to do with me, but it was certainly obvious. But those are the things that you're well, not that extreme, but those are things you're talking about, where people who are buying the tickets, as you said, you know, they're there to buy, they're there to listen to you, and you're not trying to sell, you're trying to explain rather than sell. Cool. You know, that's amazing. So you've come out of lockdown, you are free, as it were.
Released back into the wild. It's very dangerous.
And well, I mean, it's dangerous, but also we know that a lot of people have struggled through lockdown, and many people haven't. I, for one, haven't struggled. It's something that I've kind of have enjoyed for my own personal reasons. But I know I'm very aware that others have struggled. But for you, how's it personally been for you? The difference now?
Oh, it's been a little bit of everything. It's been very intense in a lot of ways. I think my struggle was it was quite heavy hitting early on, because I kind of flew into save the world mode and like, oh God, I have to reach out to everyone and make sure everyone's okay, and kind of like caregiver mode. So I absolutely exhausted myself in the first couple of weeks, and then I had a massive crash on about week 3, where I was just completely physically, emotionally, spiritually exhausted. I've just given everything I had. So I had a massive crash, felt very emotional, very vulnerable, very raw. And then that was kind of the worst of it, to be honest. And then I went through a process of just being like, okay, I need to look after myself and actually listen to my own advice, and just kind of forget trying to get shitloads of work done, and just try and focus on making sure I'm all right and on an even keel. And then it kind of got easier after that, because I'm a big picture person anyway. So I kind of step back from situations and look at it in a kind of big picture context. So when I did that, as scary as it seems like it can be in the immediate short term, you can look at the world global view, if you like, and say, well, this pandemic is everywhere and everybody's struggling with this, that, and the other. But then if you zoom out in terms of like think a few years in the future, what's it going to look like? What's this going to look like in 5 years' time and stuff? And admittedly, still, yes, that could be scary with talk of a recession and health implications and everything else. But I just genuinely feel like it's going to be more good than bad in the long run. And that gives me a lot of comfort. And I have a lot of faith that humans are resilient and very, very strong. And I genuinely think we'll be better off as a result of this experience than not. And on a personal level, that's definitely been the case. I've seen a lot of personal development, and yeah, it's been a very reflective time actually, which I've quite enjoyed.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it? I mean, I think if everyone would probably feel that they've learned a lot more about themselves.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, they've learned more, so they can work on that. And I know,
and that's not always been a pleasant thing, I have to say. Like, as a very reflective person and as a very self-aware person, that's been great for me, because it just always feels fabulously indulgent when I have an opportunity to do it, and when everybody else is kind of in a similar headspace. That's really refreshing, because normally I feel like I'm kind of in the minority in that sense. But I keep calling COVID the brutal mirror, because it really has shown people what their life is like and made them look at it really, really hard, without all the distractions, without all the escapism that they normally have, without being able to go to the pub and talk it out and get mashed with their mates. They're saying, are you really happy in your home situation? Are you really happy in your relationship? Are you really happy with your work? And all these things at the same time. So it's been phenomenally stressful for people. And I think that's something that, you know, a lot of us can skip over, and I think especially anybody in the wellbeing space is kind of particularly guilty of that sometimes, because we have kind of grown this practice of self-awareness and reflection and stuff, and we have to remember that that's not the general population, which is why we do the work that we do. We're trying to spread awareness, and we're trying to increase people's education around those things. And there's been a lot of very shady kind of shaming behavior that I've seen, especially on social media, of, you know, we've had a few weeks off and now let's get back into hustle mode. How do we be productive? And like, the number of posts I saw about how to be productive in lockdown, I was like, fuck off, leave people alone. This is not a time to be stressing about your short-term work objectives. It's just not. And as much as people want to pretend it's business as usual, it isn't. This is like the equivalent of trying to work when you've got appendicitis. You just can't expect people to do a regular day's work when there's a pandemic. Like, call me unrealistic, but that's just not how we should treat it.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, I 100% agree with you. Productivity was a very negative to me. I've never actually thought of it when people are writing their posts out about how to be more productive. That's them, that's what they want to do. But it did feel kind of negative. It also made you feel, sometimes there's a bit of shame in that as well. It's like, oh, I'm not being as productive, or FOMO is in there again. Am I not doing as much as everybody else? But I must say that on reflection, the well-being, actually, not well-being, but the values have got better. People value their life better. They realize they've taken a step back, and I'm thinking of these people without children at the moment, but who are valuing more about what's around them, being at home, and then suddenly going through that detox of going to work. Because actually people might moan going to work, but they actually missed it. Gets that kids going to school, I hate school, but then they're suddenly missing school. Then they get over that part, and then they come into the part and go, actually, I'm actually enjoying doing this. I'm actually enjoying being with my parents. I'm enjoying my own time. Of course, they want to go out, depending on the age, go out and play. But so do adults. We want to go out and play, but different kind of play. But the whole value is...
Not always.
well, yeah.
I've been really upset that the playground is shut, personally. But
well, my playground was all closed up.
I know, it's really sad when they put like the barriers up, and you're like,
yeah. And I was doing pull-ups on the barriers, and they go, no, that's not right. I was like, oh, okay.
Swing, surely.
Setting examples, so never mind. For you answered the question that I was going to ask you about, partly asked the question in where do you see, and this is a kind of an open question in the world, so it can go any direction you want to, but how do you see the world in 2 years' time? What would it look like?
Well, 2 years feels like it's not long enough of a timescale to be working with, really. If we look how much has changed just within, the last few months, I think a
Mm.
lot of the impacts that we're going to see are going to take longer to kind of manifest, if you like, especially the impacts of like the recession and things like that. But I've been thinking a lot about the next 10 years, because obviously we went into 2020, new decade. So I was doing some thinking in January about, I wonder what this next decade has in store. And I was thinking, like, generally it seems like we're moving away from these very old fashioned, kind of like what you were saying about LinkedIn earlier, these very archaic ways of working and, patriarchal values and things like that. And I know everybody gets upset when you start bashing the patriarchy, but I mean, it's there for the taking. It's really, that mode of working, that kind of modality is really outdated. It should have gone extinct for the Industrial Revolution. As soon as we've come into the digital age, it just doesn't hold the same relevance anymore, I guess. So I really think, and I really hope, we're moving towards a more kind of intuitive way of working that's about mission, and it's about purpose, and it's about people before processes, effectively. And I think for too long we've been focused on things like tangible outcomes rather than human outcomes. And I feel like this whole situation has kind of woken people up to that idea, and just thinking, actually, what do I value, and just making them look at the way that we've lived up until now and question it, which they may not have done before. And that's maybe the spiritualist in me saying, like, oh, we're all so much more woke now. But I really think it's true. I think people have kind of realized they want to have a more conscious way of working, and by extension living, and they want to enjoy the life that they have rather than being chasing ridiculous things. Because you've got people at the moment who are sat at home stripped of their job title and all the trappings of success that they've built for themselves, and thinking, well, what was that all for? And on the one hand, that could be seen as really harrowing. On the other, it presents a really interesting opportunity for personal development and growth and self-inquiry. And I'd like to think this is the beginning of a really seismic shift in the way that we work and the way that we live. But slowly, I don't think it will show itself too clearly in the next 2 years, but it could be that investment in small companies grows because people want to move quickly, they want to be adaptable. So that will be a short-term trend that I think we'll see. Also, in the way that we work, I think there's going to be a move towards co-working spaces, because big businesses will shut big offices, but they'll probably maintain a little bit of event space so that they can have, brainstorming sessions and monthly catch-ups, that kind of thing. But all the people that are currently working from home that are struggling with that and need the social stimulation and creativity and innovation, stimulation, that kind of thing, I think they will move into co-working spaces. So you'll see more collaborations naturally emerge between big and small businesses, because they'll just interact in a much more natural, organic way. So that's something I'm really, really hoping will come through, because personally, I think the more flexibly we can work and the more we can prioritize people, the better off we'll all be.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. I think, the 2-year question, been interested in the answer, but yeah, definitely the changes are going to happen in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Those changes have come quicker now because of COVID.
Yes.
For example, medical. I mean, we'll suddenly now be able to get pharmacists. We can do orders. I know the orders were online anyway, but we'll be able to sit without having to go to the medical center. We can do it through whatever platform they're going to start using, to ensure that they don't have to actually come in and actually spread their own colds and viruses or whatever it is they've got. So, and they could have done this, as you quite rightly said, we already had this technology. We were still staying old-fashioned, but those who are leading, I guess, are not in that generation, or younger generation, of thinking. So, and that's not by an age; it's just the thinking of younger generation. I actually think in 2 years' time, a lot of that is already going to be in place.
Yes.
I think in 10 years' time, as you mentioned, the recessions. There isn't an official recession yet, but we're going to go into recession. And I know from my own experiences that's going to happen. But because of the recession, it will slow down the process of how successful things will be. But eventually, when we come out of that, is how you said yourself, we'll suddenly see the changes. The big businesses will either have to close down or change the way they work. A lot of people are going to lose out for a few years. Maybe it's going to be a struggle, but in 5 years or plus, it's going to change, and then we're going to new era that's going to happen. And I think it's definitely for the best, but it's just like it's cutting away all the weeds, isn't it? Or not cutting, well, you pull the weeds from there.
Yeah, it's kind of like softening off the hard edges is how I'm kind of thinking about it. Like, it's not to say that the old way was completely wrong. It's just very, like, the world is different now. So if you take that square and round off the edges and we move more towards a circle kind of model, if you like,
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening. So all the things that don't serve us, we can just be a bit more intentional about those things, and we can really look at the world and say, do we really need that? Actually, I don't think we do. But of course, the ones who have the most power and control and influence tend to like to keep things the way they are, because they tend to benefit from those kinds of things.
Yes.
But as those kind of ivory towers get pulled down, it might be an opportunity for a more democratic system to come up to replace it. And I'm not saying we need to overthrow the government. I'm not saying we need to do that, but some form of revolution would be welcome at this point, I think.
Revolution!
Vive la revolution!
I've never actually entered a revolution, and probably in my lifetime there has been some, but I've never entered. So I've been a bit conservative, but I'm ready. I'm there. I couldn't. I'll
be calling you in a few months' time. Like, I figured it out. I know what we need to do. You in?
I'll be there. Yeah, I would have gone to the BLM one, but I did mine on social media. But a friend of mine had gone to the Nottingham one. But I must admit, it was the first time ever, if it hadn't COVID, that I would have gone to a protest.
Same. You know? But the interesting thing about BLM and the whole movement is that I think it's getting people to question things like that, like activism. I'd never considered activism before, but now I'm like, actually, I can see the need for it. I can see the reasons behind it. But then again, social change is a very diverse and comprehensive thing. And I think we all have a part to play in it. And not everybody's part will be ripping down a statue. And not everybody's part will be screaming in a police officer's face. And in fact, I wouldn't advocate that approach because I think that's silly, but other people disagree. But it's about like finding your way, your voice, and finding your part to play. And, you know, in a bigger sense, that's what society is about. And that's what the whole premise of life is to find what your piece of the puzzle is about and get really, really good at that, because we need everybody. That's why we're here. We're all needed in some shape or form. And the more we can realize like what our unique part to play is, everybody will benefit from that. We'll feel great. We'll feel fulfilled. And then we'll be able to contribute more to the whole as well. So I don't think people, it's interesting with these kind of political debates, because people seem to think like, oh, that's not me. That's not, like, they put so much of their identity in like one form of activism or one form of social change. And the thing is, it's very comprehensive. There's always something that we can all be doing to contribute to society.
Yeah, no, that's it's beautiful. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's going to happen, isn't it? It's certainly going that way. How long it takes, I don't know, but this time I think the message is let's finish what we started. I think that will be the case. It's a new experience for me. I mean, like I said, I've gone through generations of it, but not experienced it. It's kind of like it's been, and this has been the problem. That's somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's no relevance. I've had it's video and seeing these things. It's actually brought it to the forefront and go, oh my goodness, how can you do that?
That's it. I think it's very particular of this moment in time, isn't it? Because we're not seeing anything that's different from anything that happened during the civil rights movement, which let's not forget that happened in the 60s, and we still haven't progressed all that far, which is shameful. But the very fact that we're able to see these things so much more visibly and so much more consistently, and you know, we can just see how often it happens, and this is happening now. And that's the shocking thing, is like, this is recorded live. This is happening exactly now. It's just, I think it's really made people shocked to think that these things are going on, because people who might have thought, oh, racism is in the past, it's like, no, sorry to say, that's not quite the case. It's really like, it's shaken a few of us up and made us realize what's actually going on that we've been ignorant to.
Yeah, and it's lovely to see, if lovely is the right word, the passion that people are having. I think all of us feel passionate. Obviously, if you're a person of color, you've lived through that, so you will forgive if they are quiet or don't say anything, because you know it's tiring. It's tiring to live that. I mean, I know, and I've mentioned this before. Really active over 2-3 weeks period. Very active, and it focused, and I actually stop because it was too much for me. But And I realized how tiring, mentally tired it was. And I was thinking, that's just 3 weeks, you living like that.
And it's antagonistic as well, isn't it? Even if you're saying something positive, like, I want to be part of a positive change, I want to do this, and you're just making observations about, you know, how much you want to improve as an individual and improve your own education, something like that, you get people jumping on that and being like, fucking lefties, snowflake generation, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, my God, you can't even say something positive without somebody criticizing it. And it's, you're right, it is tiring, and it's kind of, nobody likes confrontation. None of us do. And that's what stops us speaking out when we see something. If we heard something in the street that was mildly racist, or we kind of like listen back to it and we're like, is that offensive? I don't know if it is. How many of us would actually challenge it? Previously, I probably wouldn't have done, because I would have overthought it in my own head and just kind of argued myself out of it and been like, oh, it's not really your place to say anything. Blah, blah. Whereas now I'm like, it's definitely, it's everyone's place to say something, because that's the only way we're going to get change. And that's, you know, we've seen it in the Me Too movement with regards to women's rights very recently. It's like, why are we still having to talk about feminism in these terms? Why are we still having to say it's wrong to sexually assault women? How fucking obvious is that? Like,
I know. It's
just enraging. But, you know, we're part of a positive change. I think we are moving in the right direction. It's just keeping the momentum and keeping consistent is about, like you say, managing your energy rather than throwing everything at it for 3 weeks and then losing heart with it. And I think a few brands have definitely been guilty of that, of like in the kind of moral showboating, if you like, and saying the right things, but then it's like, are you actually going to do the work in the background? Are you actually going to get some training and kind of educate you? Gone with it now. It's more into the behind the scenes stuff, and it's only really something I'm going to talk about publicly again when I have sort of something efficient to say and something worthwhile saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, I find myself not going in deep, because you see there's too much conversation going off, and that's too much energy being used, and all you wanted to get across was just look at it a different way, and that goes both sides, because I do see people who are activists who are actually not helping with the cause, and this could be a person of color, this could be a person of white, you know, whatever reasons they have, but it doesn't help the cause. If they go angrily at the person, let's, for example, you have someone who's a white person who's lived all their life blinded to all this, so they've got to spend, let's say, I'm 50, coming 54 this year, and someone at my age is going to be living through it, and they've done no different. That's how and then suddenly going, oh, okay, change. And if they're sort of saying things that are wrong, they'll say the wrong terminology or the wrong thinking, and you go bang, bang, bang to them, all you're doing is knocking them back to that side, and they'll just go, yeah, I don't like them. They're activists, they're left wing or right wing and all this kind of. You have to be really more soft and understand where they're coming from. And then and others will go, no more time for talk, it's time for action. And that I agree, but there is time for talk, and as you quite rightly said, there's time for talk, but it's to take a person and say, look, this is not about me winning a conversation with you. This is about us winning together, so we are not stressing. If you find that this sort of thing you can't get over, that's great. Well, not great, but if that's what you find is not hard, all I ask you to do is then just learn a little bit more yourself, as I will learn what you have told me, and because there's never going to be a center to it, because there are lots of problems on both sides. And you know, people argue the point on lots of blacks killing blacks and all that kind of, and I hear that all the time. It's the same thing I keep hearing, and it's like, well, there is, of course there's problems there, but that's not what we're trying to resolve here. We need to resolve this issue first. And then
we can't detract from I think as a society we're really bad at this anyway. If you take it to like the mental health conversation, individuals will say, oh, well, I shouldn't complain about my situation because there are kids dying in Africa. Like, yes, there are kids dying in Africa, but that doesn't detract from the fact that you're having problems yourself here and now. And if we're always deflecting from an issue by looking at other issues, we're just wandering away from the point. Like, sort this problem here. And I think people get disheartened because it is such a big problem, and it's so entrenched in society. Like, it has been very white and very patriarchal and all the rest of it for a very, very long time. So I think that it's a really it's a massive mental challenge to try and unpick all of this, even just to understand it at a surface level. I had a really, really honest conversation with a friend of mine a little while ago, and he kind of negated the phrase white privilege, because he said, look, I'm from a working class background, I don't have any privilege. And I had to kind of explain what it meant, because the terminology itself is so divisive and people don't fully understand the term. But then he was like, you know, I want to understand the issues more, I want to get involved and help in the right ways, but it's very complicated, I haven't got a lot of time, I'm like a dad and I've got a business that I'm running and all the rest of it. So I think that it's a lot for people to take on, and it is a very big complex issue, and it's a bit academic to a lot of people at the moment, because there's a lot of big fancy words being thrown around, and people get intimidated with it because they haven't been educated throughout, you know, their schooling when it's accessible to them. So now we're having to go back and do things that should have been done, and we should have been brought up knowing about these things, like colonialism. I didn't really even learn about colonialism in school. That only came later. We learned about the civil rights movement a little bit, slavery a little bit, but not anything like to the extent that we should have been educated. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of it, I'd love a lot of it to focus on accessibility and just simplifying the messages, simplifying everything down, making it digestible and conversational. And like you said, kind of taking rounding off the hard edges. Like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think if people view it in too short term of a way of like, we need to fight this, we need to run in all guns blazing, I don't really think that's representative of the overall message, which is we all want to live in an equal society. We all want to be seen as a collective of individuals of equal value. But then if you run into a conversation, like you say, trying to win the conversation and making it a battle from the beginning, that's not, I'm not saying there's no time for arguments and there's no time for competition or any of those things. Sometimes those things are needed, but it feels like a more, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there are many people out there who are leading that kind of argument, which is not helping. That, I don't know if you've heard of George Peterson.
Maybe.
He's very he's a professor who speaks out on sexuality, equality. Some of these things he has are they make sense what he says, but it's just for the controversial, really. A lot of it, but it's not helpful. It causes a lot of problems. But anyway, you know, as you said, we can't help. I kind of look at it visionary, because I always think back about when whaling and when they used to get the seals. No one did anything to that until they saw videos. And now when I've seen a video, I like to think a person just needs to have the passion first before they can actually have the vision to look at change. And one of the things I always appoint to people to is like something on Netflix. Go and watch a documentary or film on Netflix, because they're easy in their vision, and something's entertaining for them. And go, oh no, I'm not watching the news or something like that. It's entertaining. It's like a documentary or film. And I learned something on there. It really stays with me all this time now, and that was learning about the American policies. And it doesn't relate to here, but just about what happened in America with the 13th Amendment. I don't know. And so
I haven't seen that one yet. It's on my watch list. I need to watch it.
And
13. Is it called
13. And basically, you don't want to spoiler alert, but there's an amendment on the 13th Amendment. If a black person is incarcerated, he is then known as a slave.
Yes. Yeah, they're able to do work for free. And it's like,
and there's like, but it's not a white person, it's a black person. And it's like, we've still got slavery then. We're actually officially saying slavery, and they've still got it there, and they haven't taken it out. So that's kind of shocking to see something like that. Anyway, we will allow peace in that. I'm going to ask you an interesting question now. So we've had a lockdown. And during the lockdown, we had a little bit of from you. What was that called? Your little song that you had?
I did a couple of ukulele songs. One of them was called the MLM song. That was about.
You did a couple. Hang on a minute. Have you got an album coming here? Have we?
I do not. I plagiarized my own music because I don't actually play ukulele. I just had this idea for a song, and I have a ukulele, so I then had to go away and practice and learn it in order to deliver said song. So once I'd done one, I was like, I think that's my cap, that's my limit of creativity. But I did add a chorus the second time around. So the second one, which has a chorus, is called, God, what was it called? Oh, the lockdown depression song. That is about feeling
Yeah.
depressed and moping around during lockdown. But like you were just saying about using comedy to help educate people, it had a very serious point. Like I was making the point of like, lockdown is shit, we're all struggling, but we can get through it. And I think humor is a great way of galvanizing people behind a cause and to educate people, because it makes it that much more palatable, like I said before, and kind of accessible. So you can make a very serious point, but in a light-hearted way. I think people digest it more easily that way.
Yeah, I mean, I had a friend who he was doing studies sorry, she was doing studies for a gynecologist, but she's a deaf person. Anyway, she's during lockdown, she got the job, and she's one of the best gynecologists at her place.
Amazing.
And asked her what is it about her, what makes her the best. She said, I read lips well. Yeah, so
that took me so long to get. Oh my god.
Sorry. Anyway, during lockdown, just throw you off course there.
Oh god. Should I just hang up now?
Yeah. Just to keep you awake. I should have gone and anyway.
You got a drum kit there as well.
I don't have a drum kit. I got rid of that quite quickly when my daughter was playing it. So
yes,
I have a music studio. I used all different excuses for that. So in lockdown, I got a question for you. Then lockdown, your feelings that we had between lockdown and now. If you had a say in who you were, and we had a choice of you were earth, wind, fire, or water, which one of those would you choose and why?
What, who I was pre-lockdown or post-lockdown?
Yeah, if both? It's the same or if it's changed, then...
I love this question because I'm into like very nature things, so elemental archetypes in my bag. I would say as a person generally, I'm quite like water, because I have that kind of there's sort of hidden depths and so on. A lot of people would call me quite fiery, and definitely I do get fired up about stuff very quickly, and I'm very energetic and very very much like that. But then I think water is powerful, and people don't give credit to water. And I think when I think of water, I think of just like a force of nature, and that's kind of what I want to align myself more with, the kind of calm side of my personality. Like when I meditate and when I actually take a step back from things and when I calm down, I often find that's when I get like the clarity of thought. Whereas when I'm at my most fiery, yes, that's really useful sometimes, but I actually find maybe more harm than good comes from that sometimes. And I rush in a little bit, and I need to take the edge off of that and just calm down. So I think water and fire are very equal in terms of like how powerful they are, but they operate in very different ways. So I think as much as lockdown has kind of stirred up the fiery part of me, it's also made me realize that that's probably not sustainable. That's probably good for short bursts of energy and short-term focus, but longer term I want to have that kind of presence that water has, of being able to, you know, be powerful when you need to be powerful, but then be calm and be, you know, sustain people around you as much as anything else. Like water is there to sustain us all and just be a calming presence. So I'd like to think I'm moving more in that direction. And air and earth are irrelevant in this analogy, and just don't matter.
Yeah, but it's interesting because what you kind of brought out there is you're more about strength and power.
Yes, absolute megalomaniac. Correct.
So no, but in a good way. I mean,
that is very insightful, because it's indicative of what I think we're moving towards as a society. Because I think when you say the word power or influence or things like that, people think in a very certain, or I know I had this very certain archetype in my mind of a very alpha person and a very aggressive approach, and very much like total bastard, basically, of someone who just does things and all they care about is the power. But what I realize now is that we all have power and agency within us, and if we actually tap into that and we bring that out in ourselves, that has phenomenal power. If we all work together collectively, I think it can be a really, really good thing. But for too long it's been monopolized by a very certain type of person, and again it's been kind of like manipulated and made to be an evil thing rather than a good thing. I think the more we can all tap into our individual sense of power, the better society will run, because we don't need anything to that degree. We don't need masses of power, masses of influence, masses of resources, and that's, you know, what society has done. But actually, if we all scaled it back and just said, look, there's enough for everyone, we can all have a unique sense of agency and enough food to be happy, and enough of everything. There's enough of everything to go around. But society has kind of turned us against each other and made it all a competition, whereas it doesn't need to be. So
yeah, no, it's good. It's a good thought process on. I would say everything that we do now is definitely now changing in that way. I was looking at that question as you were answering it. I was thinking to myself, what would I be? You know, that, and as I was hearing you thinking, oh, your power and that, what came across mine was like water. And I was like thinking, not water, sorry, wind. And I was thinking, why wind? And it made me realize it because it's wind of change. So I'm very much a person. I love change, adapting. I like the breezing through things. It's all. I know it sounds really weird saying those things, but it's really interesting. As I'm asking you that question, sort of you think about it. So the audience may be like looking at themselves and thinking, hang on a moment, yeah, I'm one of these, and why? And you learn a bit more about yourself. But yeah, very powerful.
That's the thing, is when you sort of compare all the archetypes, if you really think about it, I agree with you. Like I love the wind as well. Like I when I go out on a windy day, it feels like something's changing, and it never feels stagnant when it's a windy day. It always feels like something is happening in the world. And if you think of those different archetypes, you'll think sometimes it would be even hard to choose a favorite or which one you want to be on which particular day, because you think, oh well, they're all cool in their different ways. But that's just indicative of us as humans as well. Like we're all great in our own unique ways, and we fluctuate and change over time as well. But
yeah,
there's always something to be gained from each of us.
You're right. I mean, change, I think you're right, because I chose wind because of, I think, the change of maturity for me, and the knowledge. I think there's some wisdom that comes with the wind. And I think of something like Pocahontas. If you've watched Pocahontas, and the wind sends messages. And I think for me in my lifetime now, it's about being that wise message across. You know, if I can articulate that, what I'm thinking, then I know I'm achieving what I want to do. And that's like everybody's life, but it does change. You're absolutely right. It changes as you go on, as you get older.
Yeah, I think some certain life stages kind of resonate with the different archetypes as well. I think fire is quite a youthful kind of anarchic energy, and a lot of young people going through that phase of their lives of figuring out who they are and what they want, and kind of all the hormones are rushing around and stuff. It gives you that very maniacal, chaotic kind of energy, which you kind of associate with fire. And then you're right, as you age, you might go towards another archetype. This is tapping into like a very ancient way of viewing the elements that's very much in line with like Wiccan beliefs and things like that. And if you've ever read tarot, they associate the suit of swords with air, and then it's all about the intellect and the mind and how you distill information and communication and things like that. So super interesting topic.
It's absolutely interesting, but we're going to run out of time, so we better cut it there, because I could go on for hours with you. It's
why don't we? Let's do a four-parter.
Why not? I mean, if the audience might come back, we want more
next week, Earth edition.
So how do people get hold of you, Alice? How do they contact you if they want your services?
I mean, it's very easy. I'm usually on LinkedIn, so LinkedIn is a great shout, or Instagram. I'm on Alice Lyons Wellbeing or Dark Coffee Wellbeing. You can look Alice Lyons on LinkedIn, or just send me an email, talk@darkcoffee.co.uk.
Talk@darkcoffee.co.uk. We will definitely we'll put the links in. We'll try and do some cleverly things if we can over the top of our conversation. But thank you very much for being a guest on the show today. It's been a delight.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
No, it's been wonderful. And best of luck out there. And when I get out there myself, I will come and join you.
Yes, please do. I think the world needs to be more scared of me at this point.
Well, let's go. Thank you very much, Alice.
Thanks, Stephen. Bye.
Brilliant.